Let's swim through Dominant Species Marine.
So I'm going to preface this video by saying this is a two-player only review of Dominant Species. We live in wonderful Ontario, Canada, and we've been in a lockdown for a while, and we are still in a lockdown stage. So no game group right now, but this is one we're definitely looking forward to getting to the game group. But just to get into the two-player review, Dominant Species Marine, you can play this with two players. You can play it traditionally, so a character, a species aside, or you can play it with the variant where you have two species. They both play a little bit differently, but they both play kind of the same. Which one do you prefer?
I really like the variant where you're playing two characters. So it's almost as if you're playing a four-player game, and you win by
lowest scoring species.
Yeah, lowest scoring species that you control. And that's going to be your score. So I found that to be a really cool variant. Rather than just controlling one, you're really trying to manipulate the two, but you want to keep them close enough and not allow one to steamroll ahead, because it's that one in the back that's going to be your overall score.
Yeah, it has a different feel. Like if you're playing multiplayer, I'm going to assume, or if you're just playing a single character each, you're trying to obviously just dominate everybody else on the board and all the other species. In this one, you have to be careful to not dominate your secondary character that's a little bit lower. And at other times, you're just trying to keep some of those scoring modules. You're like, oh, I could grab that for character one, which is way up here, but I'm gonna take that risk and try to get it for my lower scoring character to try to move them up towards the chain. So it's a really cool and a really thinky dynamic that I'm honestly surprised other games don't use.
Yeah, I really enjoy it, especially because in Dominant Species, each species has a hierarchy based on where they are basically in the food chain. Automatically, one of your species is going to have an advantage over the other. So that way alone, I find that obviously, if one is the highest up the food chain, it's going to be the last player, but it has some advantages against the other one, so you really have to balance and play.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull a couple games off here. I'm going off script here, but just a couple war games here. I would say of the two of us, I am more of the follow the war game company. I was able to talk Lisa into this. How was I able to talk you into this?
So, I'm not going to lie. I love science. I love marine biology. So this game fascinated me on theme alone. The evolution codes that come in this game are really on point for things that actually happen. And I'm just always so intrigued to see what's happening and how it's happening from a science aspect. And then even if you're not into science, the mechanisms and the gameplay of this game doesn't feel overly warlike, even though it is area control in a lot of ways, because you're trying to eliminate the other species. And you're trying to make them go extinct and you to succeed and flourish. So, I mean, in a way, it's similar to a war game. It's just your species instead of different countries. But you won me over on theme.
I would say this game it's not as strategic as one would initially think, just because I find that the cards, what are the cards called again? They're
evolution cards.
The evolution cards. When the evolution cards come out, they, depending on what they are, they can drastically change the state of the game. So the evolution cards will have, take all this one species off, take everything off the board, change a couple things around, whatever it may be. So I find the cards themselves are interesting because they really can put a thorn in what your game plan is, to the point where if I know there's something that she wants, I almost have to go ahead and grab it myself, or try to figure out a way to manipulate my board around to mitigate the damage that's going to come from it. So it's a cool mechanic as well. So I do think you have to be flexible in this game.
Yeah, it's a worker placement in the sense that you have pawns that you are going to be putting out in order to take different actions. And each action allows you to do something. As you move your way down the list of actions, you cannot take your pawn and go above them. So you do have to kind of strategize how you're going to take your actions and in what order. Because once you pick up and reclaim your pawns. Once everybody does that, the phase ends and we go through something called reseeding. So you want to make sure you don't go to the bottom too early, but sometimes you choose to go there even if you have less actions because you really want a particular action before your opponent gets there.
So if you haven't seen us before, Marathon Meeples, we're all about replayability. Some of the things I do appreciate that they've put into this game is they give you extra pawns, they give you extra stickers. There's the typical GMT quality, so they know that the games are going to get played over and over again. There's a certain flow within the game that you're going to play most times. You're going to try to get out, do certain actions at the start, and you're going to try to dominate because the domination gives you some of the other pawns. But I do feel that the extra replayability comes into the tactical nature of the game based on the evolution cards and some of the different scoring mechanics throughout.
Yeah, and in addition, every time you play, you're going to get a different trait code. So right off the get-go, when you get started, your species is going to have a specific trait that is unique to that game. And then on top of that, those evolution codes, as Matthias said, can drastically change the game because some of them can wipe out a species almost altogether. Some of them can almost wipe the board, depending on how many species and how early that code came out. And others can just have the points that you are getting through other actions. So that evolution code board is going to change how you play as well as where you are in the food chain. Yeah. If you're only playing 2 characters, one character or one species is going to be higher up the food chain than the other.
Yeah, and that gives them an advantage. And then conversely, if you're lower down the food chain, you get a turn order advantage. I think one thing that I do like about this game is it starts to become a little bit chess-like once you start to understand who your opponent is, particularly in a 2-player game. Okay, I know Lisa likes to do these movements, so I'm going to have to try to get ahead of it, or I can wait back a little bit more. I know she likes to use her domination action pawns for this. So there's definitely a little bit of cat and mouse. The more you play against the same kind of opponent, or the same opponent, the more you kind of figure them out. So I would think of like Twilight Struggle has that as well. When we play that, we kind of understand what we're both trying to do, and we just know each other a little bit better the more we play it.
Yeah, and the other interesting part is you can block people out of actions. So it really...
You're good at that.
Yeah, I am. So it's really advantageous if you know the player you're playing because you know what they are likely going to do next, and you can try to get there first. So if you don't have a dominate, and then there's also actions that are quite mean. So because of that, you can manipulate the board and potentially help yourself by interfering with the other player's plan.
Yeah, and in the variant mode, when you're playing 2 characters, if let's say I have a card and I'm character 1, it will say all other species. It also includes my secondary character. So sometimes you have to watch that, which is another cool another thing you need to balance when you're playing the 2-player variant that's included in the back of the game book.
Yeah, and that, for a replayability standpoint, I love playing the 2 characters and doing that variant for that reason. I enjoy the puzzle of instead of just going after and saying, I want to kill everything on the board except for me, I love the fact that I have to balance the 2. So I can't go after everything that's amazing for my one character because at the end of the day, my final score is going to be that secondary character. So between my species, I need to make sure that I am building them both up while still maintaining and watching what the other player is doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a fair point. So, Lisa, what do you think overall?
Overall, this game is definitely a lot heavier than a lot of our collection. And I like that because there is some depth to this game. There's some meat. And also, I find every time we've played it, we've gotten more into it and understood the actions. Even though it was quite easy to get it to the table the first time.
Yeah, I think when you say heavy, I think almost like Food Chain Magnet is heavy in terms of what you're doing. Oh my gosh, I got to figure out who I'm going to put out. But the actual rule set isn't that bad. And I think that is something I would say about this game. if there's heaviness, I don't find it maybe super heavy, but if there's heaviness, it's more based on what you're trying to do, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I need to learn 1,000 rules. And the included player aid sheets that they have here are awesome. Like, they basically, you don't even need the rule book. You can just look down at the player aid and say, okay, this is what this does. So your first couple games, that really helps out.
Yeah, if you watch a playthrough video of this and then use those player aids, you're almost good to go. Mm-hmm. So from a accessibility standpoint, great. And in comparison to a lot of other GMT games, the rulebook is light in comparison, I find.
Yeah, well, it's not Fields of Fire. So yeah, I would say that.
So for our collection, we love having something that has a little meat on its bones. So for our collection, it's going to go the distance.